Welcome back to the Chiropractic Marketing Assistant Training Series. And this particular topic is the personality profiles, which is a tremendously valuable topic in so many ways. But I'll just share with you what it is. What we do is we evaluate the basics of personalities for the strengths and weaknesses. But here's how it's used. Here's how the first way is to understand yourself. It's to understand your natural strengths and your natural weaknesses. So that's the very first way to use it. So it's of tremendous value. The second way is understand the staff members. This helped tremendously with my staff members to understand the other staff members. So the communication among staff members significantly increased once we did this, and everybody understood each other's personalities and their strengths and weaknesses. So it was a tremendous benefit as opposed to not understanding and then creating conflict. See, that's what happened. It removed a lot of conflict because of the understanding is what happened. And then the third area, and actually the most important area relative to our terms, is how this relates to patients. You see, because depending on the patient's personality is going to be dependent on how we communicate with them. So if we understand the patient's personality, it gives us a better idea of how to communicate with them. And I'm going to go into specifics about that. So it's really beneficial in three ways. And I'll just share with you, this was a tremendous, when I learned all this many years ago, this was a tremendous benefit to not just me personally. It helped in my personal life. It helped me communicate and interact with team members. And of course, it definitely helped with patients. I mean, I was able to significantly increase my ability to communicate with patients because I understood them more, because I understood their personality. So let's go into that. Now, the personality profile that we use is called the DISC profile. Now there's, the oldest one that's best known is the Briggs-Myers personality profile. The DISC profile is kind of a newer one that I like it because it's much more specific. So we use the DISC profile. Okay, it's called DISC, D-I-S-C. So here you can see on the whiteboard here, DISC profile. Now, let's go through some of the characteristics here that we're going to be dealing with. So the Briggs-Myers identifies 16 different personality characteristics that we all have to some degree. And the DISC profile does a much better job narrowing it. So it kind of will go into four main categories. So it really does simplify it too. But I found it just to be much easier to understand, much easier, as far as simplification. So having said that, we've got to get familiar with the terms. So what does DISC profile mean? Now remember, why are we using this? We're using it to understand ourselves, understand the doctors and the staff, and definitely how to communicate with the patients better. So that's why this is very valuable. So what does the DISC stand for? The DISC. So the D is dominance, dominant personality. The I is influence. The S is steadiness, and the C is conscious. Okay. So that's what the DISC, D-I-S-C stands for. Dominance, influence, steadiness, consciousness. Okay. Now there's a couple mnemonics that we want to know relative to this, and it kind of makes it easier to understand. Now, be familiar with the change in words, because a lot of times I won't use these words, I'll use the other words. Here's the corresponding words you need to be familiar with. So dominance is also choleric personality. So a choleric personality means the same thing as dominance. Influence is the same thing as sanguine. Steadiness is the same as phlegmatic. And conscious is the same as melancholy. Okay. All right. So having said that, let's get a few basics out of the way here. First of all, is does everybody has a combination of these traits to some degree, okay? Most people aren't predominantly real strong in one category. I mean, it's only maybe 10% of the population that's like really strong in one of these categories. So we all have them, all of these characteristics we're going to go over here in just a second. We all have them to some degree. But typically there's a preponderance, and we call those primary and secondary. And so what I always say is I say, look at the primary and secondary preponderance, the preponderance of personality over 50th percentile. So when you look at the evaluation chart that was filled out, we'll look at all of them and there'll be a combination of everything, but there will definitely be a preponderance, and there will almost be a preponderance over the 50th percentile. So even if it's not the 50th percentile, I'll look at the first and second one. So the first one might be, up high. The second characteristic might be, 45th percentile, not 50th or above. But it's the second one, so I'll look at it. But really what we pay a lot of attention to is what is the primary, and then what's the secondary, and above 50th percentile, okay? So that's what we pay a lot of attention to, even though we have accumulation of all of these. And I'll use a lot of examples as I go through this. Okay, so now everything about and of course it changes. Let me just make a couple other comments. Personalities change over time too. Who you were probably when you were, of course our personalities are formed early on through imprinting, but they evolve through experiences also. I mean, I definitely do not have the same personality as I did 40 years ago. So it does evolve, number one. Number two, or it can evolve. Number two is there's a concept called opposites attract. Opposites attract. And it's kind of an important concept, and you find it's pretty true, is that opposites attract. And it makes sense because you'll butt heads. As an example, I'm a primary dominant personality, choleric personality. That's my personality. Well, if I don't know any better and I'm not thinking, I'll naturally rub heads with another dominant personality. If I don't know that I'm dealing with another dominant personality and how to interact with them. And I'll tell you, since this, I know how to interact with all personalities now. So I don't butt heads with dominant personalities at all anymore, because I've learned how to identify them and talk to them. Okay, so that's kind of a good example. So typically opposites attract. Now the reason I'll say that is when we're dealing with patients, you may have a dominant personality patient, and we can assume that their opposite will be, or their spouse or significant other will be the opposite. Okay, so that'll play a pretty important role as we move along here. Also, let me make another comment about that. This is not the same 24/7. In other words, who you are, your predominant personality at work could be very different than at home. And that's very true with me. And I'll use myself as an example for a lot of these things. That's very true with me. At work, I'm a very dominant personality, but socially, I'm very passive socially. So it's not, it's not black or white per se, but it's a very, very good outline, so to speak. It's unbelievably accurate, to be honest with you. So these are some of the major characteristics. You'll have a combination of them. Overwhelmingly, most people will have one or two that stick out primarily. Very few percentage of the population has one trait that is like really dominant. Opposites attract, and your profile will change. It'll change. And I've seen that even with staff members. They'll have a certain personality at work, yet their role when they go home is very different. I've seen that a lot also. Their personality changes, just like mine does, okay? So it depends on the circumstances, what brings it out in you, okay? All right, so having said that, let's walk through some of these personality traits here, okay?